Yeah? Why is that? Why do you want a PhD? You said you want one?
I want to be a psychologist or a psychiatrist. One of the two.
Oh, you do want to be a psychologist. You know the difference between psychiatrist, psychologist?
Not specifically, no.
Just the medicated part. Basically, psychiatrists are like medical doctors where they can actually write prescriptions. Yeah. Psychologists mostly, you know, if you're a therapist or clinical, you're helping people mentally try to, work around their issues. All right, motivation and emotion. I'm going to start off with sort of a consensus among psychologists of the 3 driving factors for motivation, for human motivation all across the planet. It's just the majority of what we agree on. And then the other things we can fill in are the theories, although they're not perfect, which means you need to think about this stuff too. Give me some input, but the 3 consensus of why you guys are motivated, right? Me, you, everybody else. Let's say sustenance, and under this we'll put food, air, water, sex, there you go. There's the 3 major consensus on motivation. Food for sustenance, right? You need to breathe, else you'll die. You need water, else you'll die. You need food, else you'll die. So these are natural mechanisms for motivation, right? And now we're going to get into what exactly is motivation. Sex. Why is sex such a huge motivator? What gives us, like, hey, Professor Ross, I don't think that's a real thing. I don't agree that sex is a motivator. Yes?
The pleasure that comes from it.
Okay, the pleasure, right? Optimal pleasure, right? We all seek pleasure, try to get away from pain. We all want pleasure, try to get away from pain. Most of us, we know that a lot too much pleasure is a bad thing. Try to stay in the middle, somewhere around the middle, and live a decent life, right? What is the obvious about why all the psychologists agree that sex is one of the motivators for all human life? How can we scientifically be like, hey, you know, I think that's a fact, Professor Ross, or I think that's BS? What's the obvious? Somebody pull out their phones and go to Google, or just put on your laptop. Type in current human population. Tell me what the number is.
7.9 billion.
There's 8 billion human beings. How did those people get here? Right? We don't live in a fantasy world. So regardless of your fantasies and what you think is nice, right? Or where your morality lies, your ethics, etc. We'll get to that because that's actually a thing that drives motivation as well too when we look at the hierarchy of these things. But in reality, in the real world, here and now, there's 8 billion humans. What is that real number of humans that probably should be here? I don't know, let's say trillions. Trillions. Abortions. Babies that didn't make it. Came from sex. Right? Issues with health. Babies didn't make it, they didn't survive. Right? Accidents, etc. So think of the facts. The facts is, you are here, you're lucky you made it. Congratulations, welcome to Earth. You made it, you survived. You didn't get aborted. You didn't have any real deficiencies stopping from being born. But there probably should be 1 trillion people on Earth. Maybe more. Maybe the number's high in any day, right? Because think of how many times people have sex. Right, so we take this number, we can multiply it by whatever number you want to think of. So this is the reality. That is the consensus. Sex is a huge motivator, which means that you're like, hey, Professor Ross, I'm not thinking about sex. What are you talking about, not thinking about it? You said thinking is conscious. Unconscious is stuff you're not thinking about, right? So unconsciously, why do you want to get that Ferrari? Why do you want to get $1 million? Why do you want to dress so cool? Why do you want to own that building? Why do you want to do this? Why do you want to do that? Why do you want to have that career? Why do you want to have a family and take family and take sex? You know what I'm saying? So underneath your consciousness about it, like, hey, I'm not thinking about that, Professor. That's not on my agenda. That's not on my list. That's your conscious level. Congratulations. But underneath it all, there is a need. Why? Because why are you here? Nature doesn't care about your feelings. Nature doesn't care about what school you went to, how much money you got, your family. Nature doesn't care. Nature is saying, hey, you are programmed to do one thing only here, which is what? Procreate, right? That's it. Now your own personal stuff, that's fine, but they got nothing to do with the program of nature. The code that's inside you say, hey, by the way, make some more people right here. Else, if not, you're useless to me. According to nature, not according to this. What were we gonna say?
What about the people that you like met along your way in life, like that genuinely don't want to have kids?
Yeah, we just said, nature don't care about those people, right? They consciously, right? Nature's way down underneath all that. They're consciously and actively thinking like, for whatever reason they concocted in their brain, that they don't want children, which is fine. But if you get to the root of the problem, it's normally this. I would just say this is socialization. You live in a society of money, currency, economics, rules, laws, culture, religion, all types of stuff. And those things are impactful and influence you on the consciousness of your thoughts. Right? So you're like, yeah, I don't want kids. Okay, that's cool. Nature doesn't care that you don't want kids. That's your own conscious, personal conclusions you may have come to at the moment, right? We just say at the moment, we only speak in the present. We don't speak about future because we don't know. Today you like yellow, tomorrow you like black, right? At the present moment, people can say, yeah, I don't want children. But if you get to the root of the problem, this normally has to do with things in society. Hey, I'm too broke, Professor Ross. It's too hard. I don't have enough energy. I'm too old. I'm too young. Whatever the point is, doesn't matter. But it has to deal with belonging. We're social animals, right? And so as we try to understand what motivation is, try to understand and make it simple, right? Here is not to make things complex. Try to make everything elementary. Which is why you should get your PhD. Because I'll tell you what, when you go get your bachelor's, things are complex. You're like, man, all these concepts, oh, I'm gonna take finance. I need to understand hedge funds, the alpha, the beta, the kappa. I need to understand risk. And like, man, that's very complicated, cool, you know? And you get your master's, things get a little bit simpler because you know how to talk to people and explain it. Now you're not explaining it, you just don't have it, you know, vast memory and storage of all these fancy schmancy things. But once you get your PhD, it talks like this. It goes back to elementary school, but you're not explaining in the simplest ways, right? So, although, you know, PhDs, whatever, vast vocabulary, nuances, intelligence, whatever, it makes you understand and comes full circle that things are actually simple. The simpler you make it, better it is to understand and for people to understand. Which is kind of like, hey, if you have a business, give me your two-minute elevator speech. If you can't explain in 2 minutes, that business sucks. It sucks. You need to explain in 2 minutes. Because anything that complicated, nobody wants to be involved. Right? So just remember, keep it simple. The simpler you keep it, actually, I think the more intelligence for that particular thing a person has, right? A better understanding. More complicated, you could write 300 pages about the same thing. Somebody could write it in 2 sentences or a paragraph, and they would have summed up everything you said. Right? Which gets to this other point. So for motivation, trying to understand what it is, why we are motivated to do the things we do, why do we turn on motivation for some things, other things we don't? It's a balance. The balance between boredom and pleasure, optimal pleasure, right? We're trying to seek optimal pleasure and trying to stay away from boredom, which means like we need activities, we need something to do constantly. So think about even your behavior in class, right? Like, oh man, I'm bored. Let me go on and look on YouTube, social media, return an email or something like that. These things happen every few minutes. It's nothing to be ashamed about. We're all doing it, right? But we just need to be aware of what's going on. So what is motivation? Who could define it for me? Remember, keep it simple. What's motivation? In your own words, not mine. Who could think of what motivation is?
Something that drives someone to do what they want to do.
Yeah. Right? Motivation is a drive to satisfy a need or a goal. Simple. We could use other words, we could use synonyms to it. We could say, hey, motivation is kind of desire, right? Give it simple. We're like, man, motivation is desire. Why do you desire certain things? But Professor Ross, I'm hungry. I desire a cheeseburger right now. I have a taste for it. What are you gonna do about it? I'm gonna go wherever, go to McDonald's and get one. Right? You need a reason. You need a desire. You need a need. And the goal is to satisfy the need. Now, you could say, hey, Professor Ross, I want a cheeseburger, extra bacon with all the works. But, oh, you want optimal pleasure. You're like, nah, you know what, I don't know if I want that because I'm trying to eat healthy and be a little bit more responsible in my habits of eating. Like, I'll get a chicken sandwich, a grilled chicken sandwich. Like, okay, you like balance in your life. Good, right? You know that cocaine, although it can give you optimal pleasure, right? Or heroin, or meth. You're like, I prefer to just drink me a nice cup of coffee. Right? But I don't need all that optimal pleasure, Professor Ross, because there's consequences to it. We also need to think about too, all right, drive. We could think about this kind of metaphorically, right? Talking about cocaine and meth, right, and heroin and sex, right, 20 times a day. How do we get to these goals? Like some people will walk, right? Let's just say drive, we'll use it metaphorically with like our means of transportation, our means of getting there. How do we get there with this motivation we have? Some people are like, I like to go slow, I'm gonna just take a walk. All right, some people are like, no, I'm gonna drive my car, slow, quicker. I can navigate better. I ride my bike. Some people are like, I'm taking the plane. Right? Let's say the plane is the fastest way, which we can kind of think of motivation even towards sex, drugs, do we get there the quickest? And how large is that pleasure? You know? So cocaine, you're like, oh man, I need optimum pleasure and I need it this fast. But you're gonna take some of the heaviest drugs known to man to get there. But that when you come crashing down, you're gonna realize that there's some regulation that moves, right? So start off, we'll understand some basic motivational concepts, affiliations, and achievement, such as hunger, right? Which we could call maybe sustenance, right? That includes drinking water, includes breathing, things that you absolutely need to continue living. Some of the theories and physiology of emotion. The theories aren't perfect, remember, these are just theories. Some are agreed upon, others are not. So therefore you need to think, start coming up with your own theories. Which is kind of side note of just education. What I realized is that, man, what you should be doing while you're in college is you need to come up with new ways of thinking, right? So essentially think of college as like learning for branding. Einstein's theory of relativity. Einstein conceptualized that. He basically patented the thing, copyrighted it, and everybody uses it. Just like Polo Ralph Lauren, just like Gucci, just like Ferrari. Awesome concept. But while you're sitting here learning, you're like, hey, I just want to learn the books, I want to do the homework, I want to do the exams, and I'm done. Pointless. You could actually come up with your own theory. You're like, man, I thought about that hard. Have we considered this? You could be one of these names up here. You know? Such and such theory on whatever classes you're taking or whatever you're interested in. So, that's something to think about. It really is almost like coming up with your own thoughts and branding them, which will leave a long-lasting impression and something you actually leave behind for other people to ponder and think of, right? And to challenge the theories. We need to challenge this stuff, right? Like, man, I don't agree. I think that's absolutely wrong. Okay, cool, let me hear your opinion. Let me hear where you stand. What is your debate? What is your argument? What is your rebuttal? What is your retort? That's what should be going on, I think, in college. And I think you'll get a lot more out of it. You'll be a serious kind of academic or scholar on the subject if you're able to come up with your own really interesting thoughts. You know, you could be the Elon Musk of whatever subject you're in and sitting in. You know, as opposed to just, yeah, I did some homework, I did that thing, that was cool. Like, yeah, did you add anything to it? No. Why? I wasn't motivated to. So now it's back to motivation. What are you motivated by? So there was the guy in Utah some years back. He was in one of the slot canyons climbing, and his arm gets stuck as he was like trying to go through it, right? You know the story?
Yeah.
Okay. And what did he do?
He got off the arm.
Yeah, right. He was stuck for like 5 days. You know, imagine being stuck 5 days. You can't move, and your arm is completely stuck. What do we think his motivation was to get out? What do we think his motivation was?
The desire to live.
Hmm?
The desire to live.
Yeah. All right. We go back to sustenance. The overall sustenance is keep living, else you die. His main, according to him, right? His main motivation was that he had like a dream that he had children. And he like saw himself picking up his son from school one day, a son he does not have. But he envisioned this, and he imagined himself having children. And that gave him enough willpower to break his arm, right? Break his arm to make it easier when he pulled out his, whatever, Swiss Army knife and cut his arm off, right? you're gonna have to get to that bone, and you won't be able to do it with a Swiss Army knife. Because it's not hard, right? Imagine the type of motivation you need to break your own arm first, that pain, deal with it, sit, relax, pull out a knife, and just start cutting. Stories like that show how far we could go with our motivation, which means we need a need to fulfill our desires for an end goal. His end goal was to continue life because he knew that there were bigger things ahead, things he wanted to accomplish. Expressing and experiencing emotions, right? Emotions are tied to motivation. So we need to know how to express and experience between those. So we got motivational concepts such as instinct theory, evolutionary theory, genetically predisposed behaviors, what we could call, possibly, we could call these instincts. What are some instincts that we could think of? Eat and breathe?
And drink,
Oh, okay. Eat and drink.
but breathe too.
What else? What are some instincts? Anybody? What are some instincts you have personally? Let's say fight or flight, right? We could also say things like waking up. Right? You're motivated to wake up the next day at a certain time because you got stuff to do. Now, why not just sleep in bed? Just let the alarm keep going, turn it off. You have a goal. You have a desire to fulfill those goals. To go to work, get a paycheck, to go to class, try to finish your degree. All right, so we have these instincts, these things that are just kind of within us. Which means they're genetically predisposed. Drive reduction theory, response to inner pushes and pulls. So we can kind of think of drive reduction theory is what are we're gonna do to satisfy that desire, right? What is the response to satisfy the desire, right? The pushing and the pulling of pleasure and boredom, right? Pleasure, boredom, not doing anything, right? Doing something with arousal as opposed to not doing anything. So we have to think of the immediate things we do, right? So we could say, we talked about with the food, what is your response? You're gonna get a double cheeseburger with bacon, or you're just gonna do something moderate and do a grilled chicken sandwich. So how did you reduce that drive? The means by which. Arousal theory, finding the right stimulation level, right? Which is finding the balance and understanding that balance for our motivation. The means in between, right? The good life, those things. Who here has heard of Maslow? Who could describe to me what Maslow's is? Who is Maslow? What did he come up with?
Hierarchy of needs.
Priority of some needs over others. Was that the base? We just said that, right? Sustenance. Who here thinks they're at the top of the pyramid? Somebody Google Maslow's hierarchy. Well, all of you can, whoever got their devices out. Name off the different levels for me. Starting from bottom to top.
Physiological needs, safety needs,
All right,
belongingness, esteem needs,
hold on. Physiological safety, what's the next one up? Belonging? Okay, what's next?
esteem,
Esteem? Next? Self-actualization, right? This is over the course of a lifetime. Let me ask you, where do you think you currently are? If this represents an entire life, your entire life, where are you on the pyramid right now as we speak? Where do you believe you are right now as you speak? Let me see if I can find that, Internet never seems to work for me in this place. All right, where do you believe you are right now in your life, Maslow? Obviously, you fulfill your physiological need. Probably fulfill your safety, right? You have a place to live, you have shelter, right? You're not being threatened on an everyday basis, so you're in an environment where it's safe. Belonging. Who thinks they're in the phase of belonging or esteem? Who thinks they're in the phase of belonging right now? How so? I mean, why so? Gentlemen in the back. Why do you feel that you're in the phase that we're just referencing, as the phase of belonging?
Because there's not many places that I go that I'm not a fringe or outside.
Yeah. Is that on purpose?
Partially.
Partially? Does it make you feel comfortable? Yeah. Think of high school. You graduated from grammar school, right? You graduated 8th grade, now you're going to high school. What was your main experience from high school? If you could say like, man, what was some of the hardest parts of high school? Or the hardest part? The hardest part was belonging. You probably didn't belong to every group, right? High school is about socializing. Who looks the best? Who's the most popular? Who's the coolest person in the world? Right? Who's feared? Who's respected? Who's envied? Who's jealous? All these different things. So high school is absolutely about belonging. Because you guys are trying to figure out who you are. Like, man, I don't know who I am. And maybe through these 4 years I can figure out who I am just a little bit more after all these people I hang out with. And you're like, well, I hang out with these people, but do I really like them? There is a real question. Do you really like them? Remember we said conscious and unconscious, right? Subconscious. Conscious and subconscious. Do you really like the people you're with? Are they really the best people to be around? People really have your best interests? I don't know. Right? Think of right now. Now you're in college. Are you still working on belonging? Yeah, because you're in society. You're like, hey, Professor Ross, I need an apartment. Why? So I don't feel like a loser. I need a house. Right? You wanna belong out there in society and feel like I wanna be like the regular people. I wanna have a decent car, decent job, or decent income, whatever you're gonna be doing. And making it happen, right? So you can go do stuff that normal people do. You want to belong. And depending on the experience, you're like, hey, I wanna belong in Beverly Hills. You're like, no, I don't need all that. I don't have that much desire for that, Professor Ross. I just need enough to live here. I wanna live in some, whatever area, right? You were gonna say something?
Yeah, I was just, I think that's where a lot of anxiety comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. Think back to what we're saying, right? Even as simple as I just call it boredom, we could give it all different other names. Bless you. Bless you.
Thank you.
Who knows where bless you came from? Practice the same bless you. No, we can talk about that later. Back during the bubonic plague, one of the signs of, when you have the plague, the Black Death, as they call it, is sneezing, right? So essentially, if you hit incessant sneezing, there's a clear sign you'll probably be dead pretty soon, right? So we call it fear of going. So actually, one of the popes used to walk around with a little candle thing, sprinkling on oils, and the people who were sneezing used to sprinkle it, and basically he was saying bless you, right? Like throwing this oil on these people. And it kind of stayed as a practice throughout Europe, right? Of when people would sneeze, kind of say bless you, and obviously spread throughout the
That's interesting.
What's that?
That's kind of interesting.
Yeah. Man, who knows how factual it is, right? These things in history, but this is just, what's been taught. But boredom versus optimum pleasure. Kind of what you were saying, working in between those, right? Figuring out how to get there or not get there, or figuring out your level of arousal. Those sorts of things. But yeah, so back to Maslow's. And Maslow's is used in so many different aspects. This is why it's just so, what time is it?
49.
49.
All right, finishes up. Maslow's is used everywhere. Economics, business, marketing, psychology. So always remember Maslow's. Now the highest order, self-actualization, and we'll continue this in the next class, but let me finish up this. Now you say, hey, who reached the top, Professor Ross? After you've made $1 billion, after you bought every house, every car, after all the stuff you ever had in life, the desires you had, every partner you ever wanted, you had the most gorgeous people, right? You raised your children, you did everything, self-actualization. Which is like, hey, I don't need another Rolls Royce, right? Because I already know what it's like to be. I just need to fulfill that desire to get into it the first time and say, oh my gosh, this is very separate. Once you've went past that, now you can actually have a clear thought about what's important in life, right? What impact will I leave on planet Earth? Which I just said before is, what is your contribution to education? Are you just listening to stuff, or are you gonna come up with your own theory one day and we'll be talking about your name up there, which you thought was a great concept? All right, I'll leave you with that.